Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Neurodivergent Connection. For many neurodivergent women, the story begins with being told they're anxious, depressed, or simply trying too hard to keep up. Today's guest is a therapist who lived that experience herself. After years in the mental health field and years of therapy of her own, she discovered she was late diagnosed ADHD with dyscalculia and now finds herself asking a powerful question. How did everyone miss it, including her? So sit back, relax, and grab your favorite beverage, and I'll see you on the other side. See you there, everybody.
I wanna believe in the truth, but only see what I'm shown. Got the freedom to choose, but can't decide on my own. Follow what the group is thinking, bottle up my intuition till it's popping up.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Neurodivergent Connection. Today I'm joined with Laura Zane. Welcome to the show, Laura.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for having me.
So why don't we start off with what I usually ask every guest? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, hi, I'm Laura Zane Wambarocha. I don't use the second last name because it's very long. I am a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida, and I do coaching for empaths who are in business. And my focus is primarily trauma, neurodivergent women, and homeschoolers. And I am ADHD myself with a trauma history, as well as self-diagnosed autistic. So, yeah.
All right. So when you describe yourself as feeling like an alien on this planet, take me to the first moment you remember feeling that way. What was this happening?
uh, the first moment I felt like an alien. It started pretty early on. I think the one that sticks out the most is I was about 6, and as a lot of us that are neurodivergent are, I'm pretty sensitive to the world around me. And when I was about 6, I ran into the house and I said, "Daddy, Daddy, the thunder talked to me." And he's like, "Oh, really? What did it say?" And I said, "Unto you behold this day, a child will be given." And my dad was like, "Okay, freak." Like, that kind of like,
Yeah.
and my brother was born that day. And so that was kind of the first time I felt like an alien, even in my own family. Yeah.
Now, were you aware you were different, or did someone point it out?
Uh, I I don't think I was aware I was different. That's not true. I was aware I was different because other people pointed it out, not because I necessarily recognized that I thought differently than other people. Like I would grow up with my cousins and they'd be like, "Why do you talk so snobby?" Or "Why do you use such big words?" And when like a lot of us that are neurodivergent, I was teased horribly in school, starting in about 3rd grade. And so I knew I didn't click with other people, but I didn't recognize it as neurodivergence necessarily. I just thought I was weird or that for some reason, and I didn't really understand why people were picking on me. I didn't understand why I didn't fit in. So,
I mean,
yeah.
that is such a familiar feeling, I have to say. I experienced that. And when I was in high school, we knew nothing about neurodivergence, or even the term back then didn't even start, wasn't
Right.
even coined yet. And all we knew was I had a learning disability.
Right. Well, and that's one of the things, like I didn't even know I had a learning disability because mine didn't it of course it was always there and it should have been. And they tested me and they were like, especially being a female, and I'm Gen X, so they didn't have diagnoses for females who, were gifted but also were failing reading. Like they were like, "Oh, you're just being lazy," that kind of yeah, exactly, that they didn't identify it back then. They.
I mean, that is such a hard thing to say to someone, "Oh, you're lazy." No, we're not lazy. It's just
No,
our minds work so differently, and we don't have that dopamine hit.
we don't have that dopamine hit like and I have dyscalculia and dyslexia run in my family. And so I knew I struggled with reading, but nobody said, "Oh, you might have a learning disability." And then when I got to college, I had to take Algebra 1, I kid you not, 9 times because
Wow.
Yeah, I'd get all the way to the where you could drop add point and then I drop out. And nobody back then said, "Hey, you're in all these really challenging classes. Why do you think you're failing algebra so many times?" And I was and they nobody said, "Hey, why don't we do some testing? Why don't we figure out what's going on?" So there was no real support or help back then for it, and none of my teachers were identifying it.
I mean, that is such a big thing. I mean, we take the people don't understand when we take a challenging class, it's to push our dopamine levels up. It's because it's an interest. The
Right.
minute we lose interest, it's because that dopamine's gone.
Gone, completely gone. Yeah. And then when the dopamine's gone, there's like no motivation. So and how do you force your brain to go into flow, right? Like
Mhm.
a lot of what I work with my clients is how to, I don't have any interest in that. How can I have no motivation to do that? How can I get my body into flow? And it's like, well, you kind of have to trick your brain into dopamine hitting, even if it's something you don't want to do, which can be hard.
I mean, what a lot of people don't realize is the reason we fail at things like math is we don't get it. There are
Right.
those who get it, who really understand the logic and can calculate in their mind. You throw
Right.
ADHD into that mix, and it's like a jumble.
It is. I mean, it was so I now have kids and there was a trick on the nines that my kids were taught. I'm like, oh my God, if somebody had taught me that, it would have been so helpful because my brain does do patterns, it does numbers. I can do finance all day long. It understands that, it's excited about that. But like trying to remember the times tables, I think, and I have those teachers in your head that go, oh, you're not going to have a calculator in your hand every single day. You've got to memorize these. The world fooled them. But
Yeah.
yeah, like, yeah, exactly. You need the dopamine hits to make it through this stuff.
I mean, what people don't realize for those of us who have ADHD is the minute we learn something new, what we learned previous is gone. It's
Right,
either pushed so far back into our heads that it takes several sessions of meditation to quiet our minds to go back to where it is, or it's gone because something
right.
replaces it.
Right, exactly. And that's one of the things. And for me, I don't know how your brain works, but mine works. If I'll completely forget something and then a trigger of something, like somebody will say, well, do you remember that time when we did blah, blah, blah? No, that's gone. Now, if they say a particular word or if they're like, hey, do you like if there's something like a song that's associated with it, my brain can pull it out of the filing cabinet, but it's
Mm.
not going to pull it out the filing cabinet unless you put in the right password. Like it's just not going to do it. So yeah, we forget it and it's gone.
Kind of like Sherlock Holmes' word palace, where he uses word association to like link to different things to remember
Exactly.
certain things.
Exactly. That's how my brain works. Yeah.
Now, what did little Laura do to cope with that feeling?
She didn't do very well, honestly. At one point, which is totally antithetical to who I am, being bullied, I was bullied most of third and fourth grade, and I went to the adults, and none of the adults, and I was a pretty sensitive kiddo. I cried. I still, even as an adult, I cry pretty good Hallmark commercial, and I'm crying. And when I went to the adults, they were like, "Oh, you're just being too sensitive. There, it's not really that bad." And I went to my dad, and after about a year of me complaining, he was like, handle it. And I became violent with some of the other kids, and which was out of character for who I am as a being, but it was like that desperate. And I ended up scratching. They were standing around me in a circle teasing me, and I ended up scratching all of their hands and causing them to bleed. And it was embarrassing at the time. I was fortunate in that it was one of the times my dad stepped in and was like, no, she's been coming to you for a year. I told her to handle it, because I went to a private school and they wanted to spank me at the time. And so that I was fortunate in that, but not a whole lot of support or even pulling us together and being like, okay, what's going on? Why did you get to that point? What would allow you to get to that point? Um, and then I think because I just was clueless, I stayed in that school, but it took me still a couple more years. And then I think I started masking to hide some of the sensitivity, and then I suddenly fit in a little bit more. But it was a lot of not knowing how to mask, and then all of a sudden beginning to mask so I could fit in. Of course, I didn't call it that. I didn't know. I just kind of tried to suppress that part of myself.
That's such a familiar feeling
Hmm.
because when I was in high school, I knew nothing about masking. And all I did was try to fit in, try to be something I wasn't.
Right.
And I knew somewhere deep down it wasn't me.
Exactly, exactly. And that was me through, I would say probably all of most of middle, definitely late elementary, middle, high, and then even maybe parts of college. And then when I was about 21, no, I was 22, I ended up hanging out with a band. And in the music world, it's a lot more acceptable to be yourself. I think there's a lot more of us that are neurodivergent. And it was like, oh, I get to kind of figure out who I am and rediscover who I am and be authentically myself. It was still a journey. There was still a journey ahead of me, but it was the beginning of that journey.
No, you call yourself a deep thinker. What
Mhm.
does that actually feel like inside your head on a normal day?
And I think a lot of us that are neurodivergent are deep thinkers. It means that I don't watch like the news and go, oh, somebody got hurt today. I go, oh, somebody got hurt today. I wonder how their family's going to react. I wonder if they have a support system. I wonder if, and I go 10 layers deep on that one subject. And that's just one example. That's pretty much my day on the regular. I don't think about, oh, I'm using, an AI. I think about, oh, if I use this AI, it's really helping me here, but it might be hurting the planet here. And then I have to do a deep dive. How much is it hurting the planet? And so everything I do goes into very, very deep levels of not just how it impacts me, but how it impacts the world, how it impacts others. And is there any place in that for me that I need to be supporting the world?
Would you say, is it philosophical, analytical, or is it more spiraling?
Um, hmm. It depends on the subject, right? So sometimes it's analytical, sometimes it's spiraling. So I would say philosophical, yes, in that I have my values and I want things to align with my values, but more analytical of how is this impacting this? I want to put the pieces together. I want to understand the patterns and how they all interact with each other. It's a lot of information gathering and then plugging that information into the bigger picture.
Now, when does that depth feel like a superpower?
When I'm working with my clients. I can see if they want to go deep, right? I have a harder time working with clients that are just like, come on, get in, give me some quick fixes. I want that. But when I'm working with my clients, when we can do the depth, so I'll get their history and then we'll be talking about something that seems unrelated. And I'm like, wait a minute, remember when you told me this back then? And because again, triggering and patterning. And they're like, yeah. And it's like, oh, do you think that could be related to this? And it sets off a light bulb for them. So a lot of the depth comes in. It also comes in how I see the world. I have that justice sensitivity that a lot of us that are neurodivergents have. And so I'm thinking deeply about how, and maybe not even thinking, but feeling deeply, how is this impacting the world? How is this, how are these things coming up in a way
Mhm.
that makes any sense?
Now, when does it turn into overthinking or anxiety?
When I don't have control. I have to work a lot with the illusion of control. So anxiety for me shows up when I think I have control and I don't, or that I feel helpless or powerless in a situation, then it turns into anxiety a lot of times.
And when you sprinkle ADD and anxiety, what does that cocktail create?
Oof. Um, it creates a bit of spiraling, a little bit of a Tasmanian devil feel. Like I start to get not only it's that it's not just the anxiety, it's the anxiety that ping pongs off of other things. So I get, so when you're able to do that deep thinking and you're able to stack information, right? So if you have anxiety and like if I have anxiety about the world, it's not just like this one little piece. I worry about how that's going to impact that. And then that piece impacts this piece. And they kind of bounce off of each other and the anxiety spirals. And then you start to feel a little bit helpless in the world, and be like, oh, what can I do? Forget it. I can't do anything. And then I shut down and go in the bedroom. Like I'm going to go to sleep and I can't do anything with this. So yeah, they kind of play in that area.
That reminds me of when I went away for my master's, and my first few weeks, I mean, I went across the seas to England for it, and
Mm,
my first few weeks, I was in like this panic mode of, okay, what's going on with my family? What's going on with my classes ahead? Am I going to pass my classes? What's going on with myself? And my disability advisor saw that I was like in this spiral of I'm worried about everything else but the moment. And he's like, I'm gonna set you up with a psychologist.
hmm
And we sat down and she's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I'm worried about my family. I'm worried about if I'm gonna pass my courses. I'm worried about if I'm making friends. And she's like, your problem is you're worrying about everything. You except now. She's like,
Right,
what you need is a worry tree. I'm like, what is a worry tree? A worry tree is basically a flow chart that says if you have no control over this, then you don't need to worry about this. Your family's gonna be fine. You're passing your if you're worried about your classes, don't focus on that. That's in the future. You need
right.
to focus on it when it happens. You need to focus on yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And that I do something similar with my clients. So I have them pull out post-it notes and I have them do 1 to 2 words on each thing of what they are worried about. And then I tell them they write it all down. And sometimes they'll have like 30 post-it notes. And I'm like, okay, so you have your 30 post-it notes. Now, what I want you to do is anything that you can't make a direct decision and it impacts the outcome. So 80% chance or higher, I make a direct decision and it impacts the outcome, then I want you to throw the post-it note out. And they go through and they do it, and they'll end up with like 4 or 5. And I'm like, so those are the ones that are actually in your control and that you have to worry about. Everything else is just it's that noise and that hyper focus that we feel like we need control when we don't have any.
And it was interesting because during that time, I came across a story on Facebook that was almost the same situation of a a teacher walks into his class and he holds up a picture and he goes, "How much does this weigh?" And the class members are going 8 ounces, 64 ounces. And they come up all these figures and he goes, no, it doesn't matter how much you weigh. It matters how long I hold it. If I hold it for a minute, it's not going to affect me. If I hold it for an hour, my arm is going to start to ache. If I hold it all day, I'm paralyzed.
Right.
Point is, put it down. The minute you put it down, all that stress goes away and you're not paralyzed anymore and you can move on with your life.
Right. Right. Exactly. And that's a hard concept for us to get, right? Like I think that sometimes that piece of us that neurodivergence conscientiousness, right? We feel guilty if we put stuff down, or we feel like, oh, if we don't carry the mantle, who will? Rather than, okay, we're going to share the mantle. Like everybody
Mhm.
takes a little piece and it makes it lighter, you know? Yeah.
I think a lot of times too, we're afraid to put that stress down because we don't know what's going to happen if, and we're just, are because we're afraid we're going to spiral out of control.
Right. Well, and the stress propels us forward, right? Like how
Mhm.
many of us, especially those of us that are ADHD, how many of us waited until an hour before class to write the paper, right? Because we needed that external pressure to get things done. So the only way a lot of us know how to function is when we have that external pressure. And if
Yeah.
we try to fake the external pressure, like your deadline is 2 days before it's actually due, I don't know about yours, but my brain goes, yeah, you're not fooling me. I know that the deadline's actually this. So like neurotypicals can fake themselves out and have the deadline be adjusted, right? And their brain goes, okay. Our brains are like, nah, that's not true.
Mhm. Oh,
You
yeah.
know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if your brain thinks like this or if you've had this before, but when I was in school, even in grammar school, with on-time testing, my mind doesn't think that I'm the only that my mind thinks everyone in the on-time room is taking the same test. No, that's all my mind thinks. It's not, there's other people taking different tests.
Oh yeah,
That,
no, yeah, no, I think they're all taking the same test. Like it
so,
doesn't,
yeah.
yeah,
So the
yeah,
minute I see someone get up, my mind goes to, I don't want to be the last person standing here. I'm
right,
going to be the last person working on this test. I don't care if I have on timed, because the minute one person hands in their test, everything amplifies to me. The sounds
yes,
of the ticking clock, the sounds of people writing, the sounds of breathing, everything just amplifies more. So I get more distracted, and then I go, okay, that's it. I need to rush through this, get this handed in. I don't care what I get. If I pass, I pass. I fail, I fail. And that's how my mind's worked, because I panic. I don't think everyone else is taking different tests. I'm thinking everyone's taking the same test, and
right.
how can they finish faster than me? If so, I go into the spiral of, okay, let's get this done, and I don't want to be the last man standing.
Right, right. And what an easy accommodation, right, for schools to make of being like, hey, just so you know, not everybody else is taking the same test. Take as much time as you need, and just kind of reminding neurodivergent folks of that before they go into that situation. But it doesn't typically happen because most people
No,
don't think of it.
no. I
Yeah.
mean, they don't bother to tell you that.
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
I mean, I even tried to cheat, and I was so nervous I couldn't.
Right, right. That's yeah. Well, and that's I look at the world and like and again that goes to that conscientious piece, right? Like those of us that are neurodivergent, if we try to cheat or we try, not saying that it's 100% of course across the board, but like if we try to cheat, there's like this guilt factor that
Yeah.
comes in, which also then makes it easy for us to be prey for other people who may not have the same conscientious piece that we have, it can be used against us at the same
Mhm.
time.
Now, what does a hard brain day look like for you?
Um, it is a hard time focusing, it's a hard time sitting. It's where my brain only wants to do about 2 or 3 minutes of focus at any given time. And I do therapy online. So there are times when like I'm moving around, I'm shifting in my seat, like that kind of, and the whole time I'm like, okay, pull it back, pull it back, pull it back, pull it back. You know, I've learned strategies over the years to kind of help with that, but a hard brain day is me bouncing around my house or like trying to get multiple things done, and all of my
Mhm.
projects are halfway done and nothing's finished, and then I'm exhausted. So that's kind of, yeah, it's a hard brain day when those come up. Um, yeah, and or things don't click. Like you can say something to me and it'll be like, can you say that again? And they'll repeat it. And then, yeah, that didn't quite register. Can you say it again, but say it a different way? And so I'm having to and people, when they know you're neurodivergent, they're like, okay, they're getting it. But sometimes when people don't know, it's like, what's going on here? It's like
Mhm.
my brain's just not putting the pieces together.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've had that when I was in school. I was having trouble with one course, and one of my classmates was sitting there trying to explain it. I get excited because my mind kind of clicks a little, But I'm like, can you explain it again, please, so I can so my mind registers it. And he does,
Yeah.
and my mind gets a little bit more. And then the minute we finish up and walk away, it's like, oh
It-
shit, I don't remember jack shit you just taught me. And I'm like,
Remember a thing.
and I'm
Yeah.
like a sheep stick, am I like a deer staring at headlights when I'm at my taking when I'm trying to remember this? I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
remember anything you taught me.
That's exactly when I talked about having to do algebra 9 times. That was exactly what would happen. I could do it while I was sitting there doing my homework because I had the steps in front of me. If I didn't mix up numbers and move things around, because that was common too. And actually, how I got through it was I was working at a preschool and it was sold and new owners bought it, and I was in the lunchroom trying to do my homework, sobbing because it was like time 3, last time I could take it. And he's like, "What is wrong with you?" I'm like, "I can't get through this math." He's like, "I was an 8th grade math teacher. Do you want me to tutor you?" And so it was like divine just kind of placed him there. And he tutored me every day during my lunch break. And I was able to get it without whatever way he taught me, I was able to get it. And he was like, "Do you have a learning difference?" And I was like, "I don't know. It's possible, but I've never actually been diagnosed." And so that was the other piece. Like people around me who worked with me long term could see that there were learning differences, could see that I had ADHD, but I wasn't officially diagnosed with ADHD until I was 50. So it was, and I worked in schools and it was like, oh, people were like, I did the testing for the kids and they would put me in with all the ADHDers and they were like, you're the ADHD person. And I'm like, why? Because I didn't think I was thinking any different than anybody else. And they're like, because you have ADHD. And I'm like, no, I don't. Yeah, I do. But I didn't, it wasn't, I wasn't accepting it even with myself, you know.
And what schools don't realize is there are like two different types of learners out there, or three. The
Hmm.
visual, the physical, and I forget what the third one was, but when you're a visual learner, having a book in front of you and writing down and using writing things down, it kind of registers to your head and you're able to understand it and go through it and then regurgitate it.
Right. Right. And the way I remember things best is, doing homework, I would hear, um, see it, hear it, say it. So as I was doing homework, I'm writing it down, I'm saying it out loud. So I'm seeing it, hearing it, saying it. Try to do that in the classroom.
Yeah,
They're like, oh, you're being disruptive in the classroom. Quit doing that. Do it, you're, you're disrupting the classroom. And so it doesn't work in a classroom setting.
no. And that
Yeah.
one, it doesn't work in the classroom saying that's because teachers and school systems aren't taught how to deal with the neurodivergent children. They
They're
don't
really not.
know the ways of our learning are different
Right.
from everyone else.
Right. And they're really not. And it's a shame, I think it's the statistic is something, it's either 1 in 4, 1 in 5 kids have just dyslexia. So,
Mhm.
and teachers aren't taught necessarily to recognize it, and they're not taught strategies on how to teach kids with dyslexia. So when you look at that, if it's 1 in 5, that means 4 or 5 of your kids are not learning the way that everybody else, and that's if you have a small class of 20. So 4 to 5 of your kids are not learning the way everybody else is learning. And then you're like, well, quit being lazy. Well, no, it's not that they're being lazy. They're working 2 and 3 times as hard
Oh
just
yeah.
to stay focused. And that's true for your ADHDers. It's true for your, a lot of your kids that have the learning differences.
I mean, the best example I remember of that, I mean, that's a very valid point is it takes us longer to learn something than others. And
Hmm.
the best example I have of that is when I first was diagnosed with just ADHD, my parents had me go to a University of Wisconsin in Oshkosh. They had a specialty program for learning people who were learning disabled.
Hmm.
And I remember, and you were sitting down and you got to meet former students. It was me
Right.
and my parents, and we sat down with this one student. He sat down, an older kid, He's like, I'm gonna tell you something, Reed, and you're gonna remember this for forever. He's like, where it takes a normal student an hour to get their work done, it's gonna take us 2 to 3 hours. And I'm
Yes.
like, why? And he's like, because it's gonna take you an hour just to read it, an hour to process it. And then that last hour is when you understand it. It's when your mind clicks and you're like, oh, I understand it.
Yeah.
And then to fast forward, I remember when I was going for my postgraduate, I remember going to my one of my well-being advisors and going, I wish I could have photographic memory. And she's like, why? She's like, so I can sit down at my exams and just go right through everything. And she's like, I'm gonna tell you something, and you're gonna remember this. There's a difference between knowing the material and understanding it. And she's like,
Right.
those who sit down with photographic memory and just go through the test, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Those who understand it can tell you and explain it to you, and that's what you want to be. And I remember walking through a pathway and going over my work in one of my class works in my head, and I'm like, oh my God, I understand what the hell I'm talking about.
Right. Right. And that's that deep thinking, right? That's
Yeah,
exactly what that deep thinking is. Like, I don't want to just be able to regurgitate it to you. I need to understand the why.
yeah.
And my brain won't engage unless I understand the why. My brain is like, no, forget it. We are not even trying to absorb this information unless we know that there is a reason and a point to it.
Mhm.
And that's that deep, you're, yeah, on point with that. The understanding is super, it's a necessary for those of us that are neurodivergent. Like when you get into schools and they're like, well, why do I need to learn this? Well, because it's, of course, we have to cover and you're going to need it later on. Well, what am I going to need it later on for? Well, I don't
Mhm.
know, but you're going to need it later on, or you may need it later on. Well, my brain's like, if I don't know the why, I can't do it.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's that old, it goes back to that classic question of why do I need to take these courses when I'm not going to use them in the future unless I'm going to go for a job in that field that uses it. It's like, why do I need math unless I'm going to take a course? Like, why do I get, good example, why do I need geometry when I'm not going to take a job that uses geometry? It becomes
Right.
useless information.
Right, right. And that's the piece that, helping kids and even adult learners understand the why behind things is a big motivating factor for those of
Yeah.
us that are neurodivergent.
Now, was there a moment where being quirky and anxious stopped being something you just managed and started becoming something you wanted to understand?
Yes. Um, I think I don't know if it became something I wanted to understand. I think it became more something I accepted. And then came the understanding. Once I accepted it, then I wanted to know, well, why is it that way? So I think I probably worked in reverse of a lot of people. Um, the when I started when I started hanging out with the music people, I can't sing, I like to dance, but like I can't, I'm totally tone deaf. That was the beginning of my acceptance. And then through work, I did a sexual abuse treatment, and this program was just amazing. And it was all about accepting yourself and working, it was a healthy place to work. And I was like, oh, this is what healthy looks like. And so when I started job interviewing, I started doing, I interviewed in a way that was like, look, if I'm going to be, if you're going to be a job that I'm 3 minutes late, I can't tell you why I'm late, but I run late all the time. And now I know that's a neurodivergent quality, right? But back then it was just like, I am who I am. And if you're going to be like, I had to be to work at 7:15. If you were the job that's going to be like 7:16, you're late, we're going to write you up. Please don't hire me. I'm an ethical worker, but I'm going to run late and I will work through my lunch and I stay late. So I'm not stealing time from you, but this is who I am.
Mhm.
It was after that job that where it was accepting that I started going, wait a minute, why do I run late? Why is that an abnormal trait? And I started and then when I went from being a school guidance counselor into being a mental health counselor, and I started learning more about neurodivergence and ADHD, because as much as they teach you a lot in school, but ADHD, autism, there may be a chapter each, maybe two chapters if you're lucky in grad school, right? So they don't go into the deepness of it. And it's only been really within the last 10 years that what autism and ADHD really looks like in women has started coming to the surface.
Mhm.
So I was considered quirky or odd, but nobody was really like, no, that's ADHD. That's, you realize you have ADHD, until I started working, sharing an office space with another woman who was an ADHD specialist. And I was like, I think I might have ADHD. She burst out laughing. She's like, you think? Like, and, because it was so obvious, to other people. So that's when my journey began, is, when I got out into the professional world and when I had kids and saw what they were dealing with. And I was like, wait a minute, they get that from me. Oh, my son has sensory issues. That's what that's called. I just thought I was being weird. And it was, no, it's sensory issues. There's a name for it. So my own children started bringing a lot of it to the surface for me as well.
Now, did it come from your own struggle or someone's also seeing you clearly?
I think it came from somebody also seeing me clearly. I don't think it came from my own struggle. I think that for me, the struggle was normal, if that makes any sense. Like I didn't, even though that's my field, I didn't think about how I thought differently from other people until I had somebody else point it out. It just, that was the color of my lens.
Mhm.
Um, I just saw the world that way and thought everybody else saw it similarly.
Now, when did you realize, oh, my people are the deep thinkers, the outsiders, the ones who feel too much?
Uh, Probably about 15 years ago. So I was in my mid 30s and I started looking at, I had gone into private practice and they were like, what is your ideal client? And I started writing like, who are my, when you're working with your ideal client, who are your favorite people to work with? And I started realizing, oh, my favorite people are these people. And then it was that backwards reflection. Oh, they're where I was 10 years ago. It's younger versions of myself that I love working with. And that's when it kind of came to the forefront of, you know,
Was there a specific client that made you feel that?
there was an amalgam of clients, but there was one or two. So when you do, so a lot of times you take coaching courses and they're like, pick out your favorite client that you work with. And we like to all say we don't have favorite clients, but the reality is you can't help but to gravitate towards some. And it was an amalgam of two, actually. And it was two women, and I had come across the term highly sensitive person by that point, and I thought it was the highly sensitive, which is true. They are highly sensitive. What I've learned more now is they're also ADHD and, autistic and those deep thinkers. So it was a couple of women that I worked with, and I was like, oh, these are my favorite clients. And then I started looking back, and in the schools, my favorite kids were those same kind of kids. So it's the neurodivergent folks that, that do that deep thinking, that feel the world, that, the rest of the world's like, oh, you're just being too sensitive. No, we're not being sensitive. We are understanding 6 layers deep of how this one little thing is going to impact everything else.
I used to always say, and I still say it, that we wear our emotions on our sleeves. That's why we're very emotional.
Yes, yes. It's and there's a beauty in that, right? It can be
Mhm.
hard to be that vulnerable, but it's also there's a beauty in there's not enough vulnerability in the world. And so we come in and we wear our hearts on our sleeves and it gives other people permission to do the same,
Mhm.
you know.
Now, did that feel healing?
It did. It did. It was really healing to see yeah, to see that it was like, oh, this isn't that I'm weird. There's a well, and maybe I am weird to some, but there's a collection of us that are weird and that we all get each other. You know, it being weird doesn't mean being alone.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, we're unique.
Yeah. It means we're unique.
I mean, one of the things I point out a lot is I'd rather be unique and stand out than blend in.
Hmm.
I have a voice. It
Yeah.
should be heard. I shouldn't be blended in. I shouldn't be silenced because I'm different.
Right, exactly, exactly. And there's room for us all, right? It's not a pie. There's plenty of space for all of us. And each of our own different voices are going to connect with somebody who has enough similarities. Like, yes, we're unique and yet we're similar. It's that pattern of, I have this unique voice, and the way I say it may help somebody heal, just like with our learning differences. They teach us a certain way and it doesn't work. Somebody else comes along and teaches us the same thing a different way. And it's like, oh, clicks. The same thing is true for each of us out in the world.
Now let's talk a little bit about your company.
Okay.
Why the name Sage Synergy? What does that represent about how you work?
So I'm a holistic therapist. It came up. Um, I also have this really beautiful logo, and it represents everything that Sage is to me. Sage was about wisdom, and it was about synchronicity with other people. Like I don't heal by myself, even if it's a dynamic that happens between me and my client. But I also work with local acupuncturists. I work with local psychiatrists. I work with local chiropractors because I take a real whole body approach. So it was the interaction, the synergy between not just me and my client, but me, the other healers, and my client, and supporting them in all of that. And then, and then the heart that also takes. Wisdom isn't, it's bodily wisdom, it's mental, physical, emotional wisdom, and how those all interact as well, and the synergy between those three pieces as well.
Now, what kind of energy do you intentionally create in your space?
Usually a calm, like a little bit fun, a little bit. I have very dark humor. So it's not unusual that a client will be like, I'm not going to say in their heaviest, but I also like if they're bringing up heavy stuff, we're going to work on that heavy stuff. But I also see the light in the heavy, if that makes any sense. So they might be in the middle of darkness, and then there'll be something that my brain collects and it'll start to laugh. And they're like, what are you laughing at? And I'll share with them, like, do you see how this is? And they'll start laughing. So it's a combination of combining light and heavy, but also very peaceful. I offer spirituality from a trauma lens as well. So I do a lot of that. And then also non-traditional support for people who are ADHD and neurodiverse. I find that a lot of my people are really sensitive to medications. And so they've either gone the medication route and been burnt out and they're looking for something different, or they're considering exploring medication, but they've had medication reactions in the past. And so they need people who are going to work slowly and help them, make sure that they're not having a reaction. So I do a lot of working with naturopaths and people who are going to also do herbals and recommend herbals as well before we take the heavy hitters and bring in Western medicine. I'm not anti-Western medicine, but I think it should be very cautiously used. And I don't think we've done enough as a society understanding how medications affect neurodivergent brains,
Mm.
you know.
Now, if somebody walked in feeling like an alien, what do you want them to feel in that first 5 minutes?
I want them to feel seen and safe and like, oh, maybe this person gets me a little bit. I don't have to get them 100%, but I want them to feel seen, and I want them to feel like maybe understood just a little bit.
Right. Now, how do you work differently with deep thinkers compared to traditional therapy models?
I think I go deep and I'm vulnerable with my clients. I show up with my clients. I'm very much so who you see is what you get. And I try to show up with my clients. I don't know exactly what I do different than traditional therapists. Again, that's kind of like I don't necessarily see myself. I know I'm doing something different. I do a lot of metaphorical therapy. I do a lot of meeting my clients where they're at. And I know I'm doing something different because I'm the person that people come to, and they've been to 3 or 4 different therapists, and then they get to me and they're like, oh God, finally somebody who understands me.
Mm.
But I think it's because they've been to non neurodivergent therapists.
Now, what do you think most therapists misunderstand about ADD brains?
Um, One thing I think is if they're not neurodivergent, they don't understand that we have to understand the why. I think that a lot of them feel like, oh, if you just take medication, it's going to be okay. We'll get you on the medication, and it's not. I also don't think a lot of them understand the trauma of living in a world as a neurodivergent person and living in a world that's not really designed for you. I don't think that they truly get the trauma of that. And so I think that's a big piece of it. Like, they don't feel understood, they don't feel heard, they don't feel, and it's not for a lack of trying, but again, we only have maybe a couple semesters in neurodivergence, and so if we don't truly have experience with it, then it makes it really hard. They also, a lot of times people are getting misdiagnosed, and I don't think that's talked about. Like if you're having sensory overwhelm, and I'm telling you it's anxiety, and if you just change your thoughts, it'll be okay. And it's actually sensory overwhelm. I'm hearing the clock tick, the light's bothering me, stuff's itching my skin. Doesn't matter how many thoughts I change, my body is still reacting to all the stimuli. And so there, a lot of therapists are going, well, if we just work on this, it'll change your anxiety. The problem is it was never anxiety to begin with. It was sensory overload, and we have to remove some of the sensory input to help calm the body. And so I think I think that's missing in a lot of therapists' work with neurodivergent folks.
I mean, that brings up a huge thing that I learned from talking with one of my guests way back when. You were right. There are a lot of misdiagnoses because they jump to the conclusion of, oh, it's either this or it's either that. They don't go deeper and figure things out. Because I had a guest, the guest I was talking about, she does specialized training for autism and stuff. And she's like, she had a parent bring in their child and say he's nonverbal. And she's like, and then she was working with him and she realized he's not nonverbal. He's got an auditory processing disorder because he's responding to music,
Right.
but not anything else. And she's like, you need to go see an auditory specialist to help figure out why he's taking him longer to process the audio.
Right, right. And that happens, and it happens frequently. Sensory issues for our family is a really strong thing. So like I had one teacher that was working with my son, and she's like, he's a behavior problem. And I'm like, so I go in the class and I'm observing, and he's 45 minutes in, sitting in the class going, and they're going, A is ah, ah, ah. It's October. He went into kindergarten reading on a first grade level. So he's expected to sit on the rug going, A is ah, ah, ah. And he's already reading. He's bored. Yeah, he's gonna move around. He needed the sensory input. He needed to be moved around. He needed to have balls. He needed to have stuff heavy carrying it around. And he was still learning, but he wasn't learning the way that was meant for him. So we ended up, changing schools and finding a better fit. But yeah,
Now, do you believe feeling like an alien is something to outgrow, or is it something people should embrace?
I would say embrace it. This planet needs us aliens. I would say embrace it. Like, it, obviously obviously we have to fit into some degree, so there might be some masking, but I think there's a difference between masking you choose and masking that you're going into autopilot on. And so really, if you can embrace your inner alien, and then if you have to put on your human mask, put on your human mask. But, I mean, because obviously there's times when we have to, but if you can embrace your inner alien and set your world up with your inner alien as much as possible, that's amazing.
Now, what's something about quirky, anxious ADHD minds that the world gets completely wrong?
Um, I think that they think they're lazy. I think that they think they're bizarre and don't have, um, that they're just kind of like I guess what keeps coming up is I had a boss say to me, don't go too woo-woo once. And I was like, I'm not going woo-woo. I'm meeting people where they need. And I think that quirky allows for you to embrace other people for who they are. And I think that we are seen as outcasts when we're actually the receivers.
Hmm. Now, if you could sit across from your younger Laura, the one who felt out of place, what would you tell her?
I would tell her that it's not you, it's the world. I would tell her that you have this unique, beautiful brain that's going to help a lot of people heal and just hang in there. Yeah.
That kind of reminds me of something. I am in the middle of writing a new book,
Hmm.
and it's like Harry Potter, but it deals with main characters are neurodivergent, and it deals with neurodivergent topics of family, belonging, found family.
Right.
And one of the things I have the main character go is I have him say early on, he's like, but I'm different. I'm autistic with ADHD. And then I have the mother go say something like, it's you used to have the world, you used to reach for the world. Maybe it's time the world came to you.
Yes. Yes. And here's the thing, if the world, they've shown that text messaging came for deaf people, and yet everybody uses it.
Hmm.
If and when the world adapts to those of us who think differently, it benefits not just us, but the rest of the world. And so why wouldn't we adapt it? Why
Hmm.
wouldn't we make it so that it's more accessible to everyone?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Now, what do you still carry from her today?
From who? I'm sorry,
The
from her.
younger you.
Oh, the younger you. Um, she was very justice sensitive, and still is. I think I still carry from her a little bit of imposter syndrome. Like, can I make it through? Even when I know my
Mhm.
stuff, I think she still that doubt, that self-doubt still kind of shows up. Um, I think I carry a little bit of her. I, I don't think I ever fully let the world beat me down. So I think I feel I still carry a little bit of her idealistic nature, where she's like, oh, I don't understand why the world is the way it is. Like I think there's still a little bit of that in there.
Now, for someone listening who feels they're too much, too sensitive, too different, where do they begin?
Um, that's a good question. I would say begin with looking at what is it about you're too much, too different that makes you unique? Like, what is it? How does it show up? How is that a strength? I like to work from strength based, and it's not overly positive, but you know, part of the reason I'm good at what I do is because I see patterns, right? So if your strength is you see patterns, how is that unique to you, but also your strength? And how can you begin to flip those things that the world has told you are negative into they're not negative, they're your superpower, you know?
Hmm. Now, what's one small shift they can try this week?
When it comes up, this would be the thing. I always ask people, is that your voice or was that somebody else's voice?
Well, that's so true because a lot of people think they can want to change, and then it's like, is it you that wants to change, or is it that voice of someone else saying you're different, you need to change? You
Ex-
don't need to change when
you don't
and I
exact
always tell people that is so true and that's so powerful. And I've always told people if you got a friend that's telling you you need to change, dump them.
dump them.
They're not a quality friend. They're trying to change you for them.
Yes, exactly. And so when we began to kind of really start to consider, is that my voice or someone else's? And know whose it is, that's super empowering.
Oh yeah.
That and it's like, oh wait, no, that's Sally from third grade's voice. Well, is that one that I want to listen to? well, no, Sally from third grade doesn't have a very good life now. Like, like, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
right? Like, and then, no, I want to follow my own path. We're given the beat of a different drum because we are supposed to change the world. That's why we're given that different drum beat. We're not supposed to fit in. And when you can love that part of yourself, that comes out and it shines and then gives other people permission to do the same.
No, the very big question. How do they stop seeing themselves as broken?
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think again, it goes back to, is it because you feel broken or is it because you were told you were broken? And if we look at little kids before the world takes over their minds, none of us feel broken. We just feel like who we are. And it's funny, we spend our whole lives trying to get out of childhood and then the rest of our lives trying to get back to that part of childhood that where we could be our true selves. And it's like if you can say, oh, if I didn't have the world here to judge me and I could be this person, would I still want to be this person? You know?
Yeah. I mean, that's such an empowering thing because you hit the nail on the head. A lot of times we've lost our inner child when we've grown up,
Mm-hmm.
and we realize that part of us was the true self.
Exactly, exactly. And I even encourage like people go out and play. What was the thing that you loved to do when you were little and that you were told, no, don't do that. That's not okay. Go out and do that thing because if it resonated with you then, it helps you tap back into who you are now.
Mhm. And finally, where can people get a hold of you online and learn more about you?
Yes, they can find me at my website. It's either laurazane.com or www.sagesynergy.net. Or if they want to work with me on a coaching capacity as a professional, they can find me at coachingforempaths.com. And yeah, or they can find me in Florida. My phone number is 941-650-3122. So
And that's Laura Zane. I'm Reed Miles. Stay curious, stay fearless, and remember, wherever you are, you're never alone. Thank you, Laura.
thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.